We now turn to the third element in the economic analysis. Supply, demand. The third element is how well does the economy use the available supply of skill. We've come to think of literacy as a tool, but it's also an economic asset. The more of that economic asset you can use, the better off you're going to be. This looks at how much of the Aboriginal literacy supply gets used, and at the Canada level, it looks as if supply and demand are in rough balance. 100% of the skill is put to good economic use. This average, unfortunately, hides huge variation by province and territory. So if we look at the Yukon, they're currently only using slightly less than 96% of the available Aboriginal literacy supply. And so policy implication is they need to find a way in the Yukon to increase the skill demand of jobs and to create employment so that skill gets used. The situation in a place like Nunavut is exactly the opposite. Current jobs demand 103% of the skills that people have. And so there's a need there to fund literacy training to create new supply to fill jobs that are already there. And the general recommendation out of these data is that the remedy for literacy skill problems in each province and territory is different, but everybody has a problem. So we keep pushing this utilization theme down. This next series of charts compare the numbers of jobs against the numbers of people at each level. And the first chart is for band members living on reserve in Saskatchewan. The first thing it reveals is that we have in Saskatchewan almost 20% more people at level 1 than there are jobs at level 1. And so there are economic consequences to that. There's a slight surplus, something like 5% more level 2 people than there are level 2 jobs. And then shortages of people with level 3, 4, and 5 skills. So there are more level 3, 4, and 5 jobs than there are people to fill those skills. And this imbalance implies a high degree of economic efficiency. The fix is a complicated one. It's to move people out of level 1 and 2 skills and to use those skills in level 3, 4, and 5 jobs. The situation for band members off reserve, living largely in urban Saskatchewan, the same kind of pattern but slightly different. A surplus of level 1 and 2 people, almost equal, roughly about 8% in each case, and a huge shortage, over 10%, of level 3 jobs that don't have people with level 3 skills filling them, and a smaller shortage of level 4 and level 5 jobs. For other Aboriginals off reserve, this is mostly in Saskatchewan Métis populations. A slightly different pattern, but still the same basic pattern. Surpluses of level 1 and 2 people for whom there are no jobs, and then shortages of people to fill level 3, 4, and 5 jobs where the demand is there. There just isn't the supply to match that demand. The general summary is that were you to correct these surpluses and shortages, it'll lead to economic growth that's fairly significant. Now, if we push utilization down even further and reflect on the degree to which individual skills match the demands of the occupation in which they find themselves, what we see is, of all the workers, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal in the province of Saskatchewan, over half of them don't have the literacy skills associated with satisfactory job performance and safe job performance. So 1 out of every 2 workers, and that implies a loss of productivity that, or economic potential. Were those shortages filled, people would be far more productive and the economy overall would blossom. We also see that about 30% of adults in the province are in balance, which seems like a good thing. They have just the amount of skill that their current job requires. But we know from the previous presentation that skill demand is rising rapidly, and these people have no cushion upon which to draw in order to meet that new skill demand. So they're likely, eventually, will need skill upgrading. And then about 14% of adults in the province are in literacy skill surplus. They have more skills than the jobs that they currently occupy require. If you were to make their jobs more knowledge and skill intense and use this literacy skill, they would benefit and the economy would benefit. Then looking at the band members on reserve, one of the most disadvantaged populations in the province, they are 8% more likely to be in shortage than the non-Aboriginal population. So instead of 50% of those workers being in skill shortage, 58% are. And they're less likely to be in balance or surplus. 9%, same pattern for off-reserve Aboriginal populations. So this translates into, in a capitalist labor market that's very efficient at identifying and rewarding skill, anybody with lower skills on average is going to be disadvantaged in relative terms, and Aboriginal populations in the province will be at a particular disadvantage. They will be less likely to get hired. When they do get hired, they'll earn less because of the jobs they're in and be much more exposed to becoming unemployed and have less access to adult education and training that largely goes to the most skilled workers. So in terms of the numbers are sobering. 58,000 out of the 87,000 Aboriginal workers in the province have a literacy skill shortage, so a huge percentage. That's the bad news. The good news is that most of those workers are in literacy segments C and D. Those segments are people who can read. They understand the act of reading. They just can't read well enough to solve reading problems, tasks at level 3, where most of the jobs will be and where we need jobs to be internationally competitive. So given the nature of the problem, there's a large number of people, but the problem they have in terms of their reading is not so great. What would it cost to provide them with the skills to eliminate those occupational literacy skill shortages? We're looking at an investment of roughly $120 million to solve the problems of band members in the province. About 2/3 of that would go to band members on reserve and the balance to band members living off reserve. And then an additional $50 million to deal with Métis and other Aboriginal populations in the province. So if we can call it a fix, the fix is going to be expensive. It's an open question about who should pay for that fix, whether it should be the individuals themselves, their employers, the government, or some combination of those, but the bill is large. So if a bill's large, like any economic calculus, it's an investment, in this case an investment in skill. The question is, what would that investment yield by way of returns? We know because of this link between productivity and wage rates and literacy that there are economic benefits, and they're large. Having run the analysis for Saskatchewan by the different Aboriginal subpopulations, we know that we can get anywhere between 138 and 300% rates of return. So you make the investment, wages and productivity go up, and that yields higher earnings in future years. Even if you just take those out for 10 years, each and every year you'll earn something like 250%. This is a very attractive rate of return, one that we haven't seen since the 1800s when the sewers and waters were put into the City of London. So of all things in which the government could invest, this is a very attractive investment indeed.